You know, I've been keeping reptiles for years now, and I need to be honest with you about something that a lot of people don't want to hear. Some reptiles can form bonds with their owners. I've seen it happen. Bearded dragons that run to the glass when their favorite person walks by. Iguanas that recognize their keeper's voice and actually seem to respond with what looks like genuine recognition. Tigers that follow you around like a curious dog, seemingly invested in what you're doing. These animals show behaviors that suggest they've developed some level of connection with the humans who care for them. But here's the hard truth that I need you to understand before you drop hundreds or thousands of dollars on your next reptile. Most reptiles will never truly bond with you. They won't love you. They won't miss you when you're gone. They won't form the emotional attachment that you might be hoping for when you bring them home. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's important information that every reptile keeper needs to understand before making a commitment to these animals. I'm making this video because I see it all the time in the reptile community. People buy these beautiful, exotic animals with expectations shaped by their experiences with dogs, cats, or even birds. They expect reciprocal affection. They expect their chameleon to be excited to see them. They expect their ball python to recognize them as a friend. And when those expectations aren't met, people get disappointed, frustrated, or they start misinterpreting normal reptile behavior as something it's not. So today, I'm counting down 5 reptiles that, despite what you might hope or what you might read in some overly optimistic care guide, will never truly bond with you. These are animals that might tolerate you, might associate you with food, might even seem calm when you handle them. But that's not bonding. That's not affection. That's just instinct, routine, and in some cases, complete indifference. Let's start with number 5. Number 5, chameleons. Chameleons are probably one of the most misunderstood reptiles when it comes to bonding and temperament. I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say, "My chameleon loves me. He crawls right onto my hand. He's so friendly." And I hate to break it to you, but no, your chameleon doesn't love you. In fact, your chameleon is probably stressed out every single time you interact with it. Chameleons are solitary animals by nature. In the wild, they spend their entire lives alone, except for brief breeding encounters. They're not social. They don't seek companionship. They don't form bonds with other chameleons, so why would they form a bond with a giant primate that occasionally reaches into their territory? When a chameleon crawls onto your hand, it's not because it wants to be near you. It's because it's moving away from something else, or it sees your hand as a pathway to somewhere it would rather be, or it's simply moving because that's what chameleons do. They move through their environment. The fact that you happen to be part of that environment doesn't make you special to that animal. People mistake tolerance for affection with chameleons constantly. They see a chameleon that isn't hissing, puffing up, or displaying stress colors, and they think, "See, he likes me." But what you're actually seeing is an animal that's learned that you're not an immediate threat. That's not bonding. That's just classical conditioning. The chameleon has learned that when you appear, bad things don't usually happen, so it doesn't waste energy on a stress response. That's survival instinct, not love. And let's talk about the stress factor for a moment. Chameleons are incredibly prone to stress, and handling is one of the biggest stressors in their captive lives. Even chameleons that appear calm during handling are experiencing physiological stress. Their heart rate increases, their stress hormones spike. Just because they're not turning black and hissing at you doesn't mean they're enjoying the interaction. I've kept veiled chameleons, panther chameleons, and Jackson's chameleons over the years, and not a single one of them has ever shown what I would consider genuine bonding behavior. The best you can hope for with a chameleon is an animal that tolerates necessary handling without melting down. And honestly, that's okay. Chameleons are incredible animals. They're fascinating to observe. they're beautiful to look at. But they're display animals, not pets you can cuddle with or bond with in any meaningful way. If you're buying a chameleon, hoping it will recognize you, be excited to see you, or form any kind of emotional connection, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Appreciate them for what they are: solitary, stress-prone, incredibly specialized animals that are best observed from outside their enclosure. Number 4. Emerald tree boas. Now let's talk about emerald tree boas, because these are another species where I see people projecting emotions and bonding that simply aren't there. Emerald tree boas are absolutely stunning animals. That bright green coloration, those white markings, the way they coil on branches in that distinctive pattern. They're living art. But that's exactly what they should be treated as: living art that you appreciate from a distance. Emerald tree boas are notorious for being defensive, nippy, and completely uninterested in human interaction. These are ambush predators that just spend their entire lives coiled on branches, waiting for prey to pass by. They're not active, they're not exploratory, they're not curious about their environment in the way that some other reptiles are. They find a good perching spot, and they stay there, sometimes for days at a time, just waiting. When you reach into an emerald tree boa's enclosure, you're not greeted with curiosity or recognition. You're typically greeted with a strike or a defensive posture. Even well-established adults that have been in captivity for years rarely become what anyone would call handleable, let alone bonded to their keeper. I've talked to keepers who've had their emerald tree boas for 5, 10, even 15 years, and the common thread in all these conversations is the same. These animals never warm up to you. They never recognize you as anything other than a potential threat or, at best, a neutral presence in their environment. There's no food recognition, no routine behavior that suggests they've learned who you are. They just exist in their enclosure, doing emerald tree boa things, completely indifferent to your existence. And that's not a criticism of the species. Emerald tree boas are perfectly adapted for their ecological niche. They don't need to be social. They don't need to recognize individual animals or form bonds. In fact, those traits would be detrimental to their survival strategy. They're designed to be patient, motionless, and ready to strike at anything that moves within range. That's what makes them successful predators. But it also makes them terrible candidates for anyone looking for a reptile that will bond with them. If you're considering an emerald tree boa, you need to go into that decision with realistic expectations. You're getting a display animal. You're getting something beautiful to look at and appreciate from outside the enclosure. You're not getting a pet that will ever recognize you, tolerate handling well, or form any kind of meaningful connection. And if you're okay with that, great. Emerald tree boas can be rewarding animals to keep for the right person. But if you're hoping for interaction or bonding, look elsewhere. Number 3. Most geckos. Now, this one might be controversial because I know there are exceptions and I'll acknowledge those in a moment. But in general, most gecko species are not animals that bond with their keepers, despite being some of the most popular reptiles in the pet trade. Let's start with the most obvious example: crested geckos. These animals are everywhere in the hobby right now. They're marketed as perfect beginner reptiles. They're easy to care for. They come in amazing morphs and color variations. And yes, they can become relatively calm with regular handling. But calm doesn't mean bonded. Crested geckos are prey animals with prey animal instincts. When you reach into their enclosure, they don't think, "Oh, it's my favorite person." They think, "Large predator approaching. Should I run or freeze?" If they're used to handling, they might choose the freeze response, because they've learned that freezing usually results in the scary thing going away eventually. But that's not recognition, that's not bonding, that's just learning which survival strategy works best in a particular situation. I've kept crested geckos that seemed perfectly calm during handling, They'd sit on my hand, they'd walk up my arm, they'd even fall asleep on me during long handling sessions, and you know what? The next day, they'd act exactly the same way with a complete stranger. Because I wasn't special to them. I was just the warm thing that occasionally moved them from one place to another. Gargoyle geckos, Lycianus geckos, Chihuahua geckos, same story. These are all New Caledonian species that have similar temperaments and similar behavioral patterns. They can become tolerant of handling. Some individuals are even quite calm and easy to work with. But they're not forming emotional bonds with their keepers. They're just existing, doing gecko things, completely indifferent to who's holding them at any given moment. Now, I mentioned exceptions, and I need to be fair here. Leopard geckos and African fat-tailed geckos sometimes show behaviors that come closer to what we might interpret as recognition or bonding. Some leopard geckos do seem to respond differently to their primary keeper versus strangers. Some will approach the glass when specific people walk by. Some seem to seek out their keeper's hand during handling sessions. But even with leopard geckos, I'd be cautious about calling this true bonding. It's more likely routine recognition and food association. Your leopard gecko isn't excited to see you because it loves you. It's excited because you represent food, because you appear at predictable times, because your presence has become associated with positive things like eating and coming out of the hide. And here's the thing, even that level of recognition is the exception, not the rule. Most leopard geckos don't even show that much. Most are just tolerant of handling, not actively engaged with their keeper in any meaningful way. Tokay geckos are another interesting case. I've heard people claim their tokays have bonded with them, but having kept tokays myself, I'm extremely skeptical of these claims. Tokays are defensive, aggressive, territorial animals. Yes, some individuals calm down with consistent, gentle handling over months or years, but calmer than they used to be is not the same as bonded. A tokay that doesn't bite you every single time you interact with it hasn't bonded with you. It's just learned that biting doesn't make you go away, so it might as well conserve energy. The bottom line with geckos is this. They're generally solitary animals that don't form social bonds in the wild, so they're not predisposed to form those bonds in captivity either. They can become habituated to handling, they can learn routines, they might even show food recognition or time of day recognition. But true emotional bonding the way a dog bonds with its owner, that's not happening with the vast majority of gecko species. Number 2. Ball pythons. This one might surprise some people because ball pythons are incredibly popular, incredibly docile, and often recommended as great pet snakes for people who want something handleable and interactive. And it's true that ball pythons are generally calm, tolerant of handling, and unlikely to bite compared to many other snake species. But docile doesn't mean bonded. Ball pythons are probably the most misunderstood snakes when it comes to bonding and temperament. I see it constantly in online forums and Facebook groups. People posting pictures of their ball pythons and talking about how much their snake loathes them, how their snake recognizes them, how their snake is happy to see them. And I understand why people want to believe this. Ball pythons are beautiful animals. They're fun to handle. They feel good draped across your shoulders or moving through your hands. It's natural to want that experience to be reciprocal, to believe the snake is enjoying it as much as you are. But the reality is that your ball python doesn't care about you. It doesn't recognize you as an individual. It doesn't form emotional attachments. It doesn't feel affection, love, happiness, or excitement when you approach its enclosure. What it feels, if we can even use that word for reptilian neurological processes, is a series of instinctive responses to environmental stimuli. When you reach into your ball python's enclosure and it stays calm instead of striking or trying to escape, that's not because it recognizes you as a friend. It's because it's learned that large movements in its environment don't always result in danger or food. It's stopped wasting energy on defensive responses because those responses haven't been necessary in its experience. When your ball python seems to enjoy being handled, what you're actually seeing is an animal in a state of sensory confusion. Snakes don't have the same temperature regulation that we do. When you hold a ball python, your body heat affects its perception. The movement of handling can trigger exploratory behaviors that look like the snake is active or engaged, but really, it's just responding to physical stimuli. It's trying to thermoregulate. It's trying to figure out its spatial environment. It's not bonding with you. I've kept ball pythons for over a decade. I've had individuals that seemed calm and easy to work with from day one. I've had others that took years to reach that level of tolerance. And you know what I've learned? The calm ones aren't calm because they love me. The defensive ones aren't defensive because they hate me. They're just individual animals with different temperament variations, responding to their environment based on instinct and previous experience. One of the biggest misconceptions about ball pythons is the idea that they seek out their owner's warmth or presence because they like being with that person. I've heard people say my ball python always curls up in my lap, or my ball python stays calm on me for hours. And yes, those things happen. But a ball python curling up in your lap isn't seeking your companionship, it's seeking your heat. A ball python staying calm during extended handling isn't bonding with you. It's conserving energy because it's learned that movement and stress responses are unnecessary in this situation. Think about ball python behavior in the wild. These are ambush predators that spend days, sometimes weeks, in the same hiding spot waiting for prey. They're designed to be inactive. They're designed to conserve energy. They're designed to minimize movement and risk. When your ball python sits calmly in your hands for an hour, it's not enjoying quality time with you. It's doing what ball pythons do, which is basically nothing. And here's another reality check. If you took your bonded ball python and handed it to a stranger with similar body temperature and handling technique, the snake would behave exactly the same way, because it doesn't know the difference. You're not special to that animal. You're just a warm surface that occasionally moves it from one place to another. Does this mean ball pythons are bad pets? Absolutely not. They're fantastic animals for the right keeper. They're manageable, relatively easy to care for, stunning to look at, and yes, they're handleable in a way that many reptiles aren't. But if you're buying a ball python hoping for an emotional bond, you're going to be disappointed. Appreciate them for what they are. Beautiful, docile snakes that tolerate human interaction well. Just don't mistake tolerance for love. Number 1, Hognose Snakes. And now we've reached number 1, Hognose Snakes. And I know some of you are already typing angry comments, but hear me out. Hognose snakes might be the single most misinterpreted reptile species when it comes to bonding and temperament. These snakes have become incredibly popular in recent years, and I completely understand why. They're small, manageable, relatively easy to care for, and they come in absolutely gorgeous morphs. But more than any of that, people are drawn to hognoses because of their quirky behavior. Hognose snakes have personality, or at least they have behaviors that we interpret as personality. They're dramatic when threatened, playing dead with the tongue hanging out, and everything. They're enthusiastic eaters, often putting on a show during feeding time. They're active and visible in their enclosures. They do this adorable thing where they dig and burrow and rearrange their substrate. All of these behaviors make hognose snakes seem more interactive and engaged than many other snake species. And this is where the misinterpretation happens. People see all this activity, all this behavior, all this seeming engagement with the environment, and they think, this snake has personality, this snake recognizes me, this snake is bonding with me. But that's not what's happening. Hognose snakes are food-motivated to an extreme degree. They're specialized feeders in the wild, primarily eating toads and other amphibians. They've evolved to be active foragers, using their upturned snout to dig through substrate, looking for prey. All of that personality you're seeing, that's just predatory behavior. That's foraging instinct. That's a food-motivated animal doing food-motivated things. When your hognose snake seems excited to see you, what it's actually responding to is the association between your presence and food. You appear, and then food appears. Over time, your appearance becomes a predictor of food, so the snake becomes active and engaged when it sees you. But that's not recognition in the way dog people understand recognition. The snake isn't thinking, "Oh good, it's my favorite person." It's thinking, "Movement equals possible food." I've done this experiment myself. Have a stranger feed your hognose snake for a week while you stay out of sight. By the end of that week, the snake will respond to the stranger exactly the way it used to respond to you, because it was never about you as an individual. It was always about the food association. People also misinterpret hognose defensive behavior as personality or bonding. A hognose that puffs up and hisses when you first approach, then calms down when it recognizes you, hasn't actually recognized anything. It's just going through its defensive sequence, determining whether you're a threat, and then settling down when it decides you're not worth the energy expenditure. That's instinct, not bonding. And the handling behavior, the handling behavior. I see so many people claiming their hognose snakes love to be handled, that they seek out their owner's hands, that they enjoy interaction. What's actually happening is the snake is using you as a climbing surface and a heat source. Hognose snakes are active, curious snakes that like to explore. When you provide your hand as a surface to explore, the snake explores it. Not because it's bonded to you, but because exploring is what hognoses do. I've kept multiple hognose snakes over the years. Eastern hognoses, western hognoses, southern hognoses. Every single one has shown these personality behaviors that people love. Every single one has seemed engaged and active and interactive, and not a single one has ever shown what I would consider genuine bonding behavior. They respond to feeding time. They explore when given the opportunity. They go through their defensive routines when startled. But none of that is relationship-based. It's all instinct-based. Here's the test I always suggest to people who think their hognose has bonded with them. Stop feeding the snake for a few weeks. They can easily handle this metabolically. And see if it still shows the same excitement when you approach. 9 times out of 10, the snake becomes noticeably less interested in you, because it was never about you. It was always about the food. Now, does any of this mean hognose snakes are bad pets? No, they're fantastic snakes. They're fun to keep. They're active and interesting to watch. They're handleable and relatively docile despite their dramatic defensive displays. But they're not bonding with you. They're tolerating you at best, and more accurately, they're just responding to environmental stimuli with pre-programmed instinctive behaviors. Honorable mentions. Before I wrap, to give a few honorable mentions to other reptiles that people commonly misinterpret as bonding animals. Green tree pythons are beautiful, fascinating snakes that people often buy, thinking they'll be like friendly versions of emerald tree boas. They're not. They're defensive, they're nippy, and they're display animals that want nothing to do with human interaction. Malagasy cat-eye snakes have those gorgeous eyes and that interesting activity pattern, but they're flighty, defensive, and completely uninterested in bonding with keepers. Rosy boas and sand boas often get marketed as calm, handleable species, and while that's true to some extent, calm and handleable doesn't mean bonded. These are slow-moving ambush predators that tolerate handling because they're too slow to escape effectively. That's not affection. Look, I'm not trying to discourage anyone from keeping reptiles. I love these animals. I've dedicated a huge part of my life to keeping, breeding, and learning about them. But I think it's critically important that we go into reptile keeping with realistic expectations. Reptiles are not mammals. They don't have the same brain structures that support complex social bonding. They don't form emotional attachments the way dogs, cats, or even birds do. And that's okay. They don't need to bond with us to be valuable, interesting, rewarding animals to keep. What reptiles can offer is something different. The opportunity to observe and interact with animals that operate on completely different neurological principles than we do. They give us a window into alternative ways of experiencing and responding to the world.